Welcome back to the Producer Podcast. I'm your host, Micah Versman, and today we are concluding our series on film distribution as we focus on studio level distribution by talking to Joshua Walsh. So without further ado, let's dive in and get started. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so maybe to start, just kind of share a little bit about how you got started in the industry and how you wound up being a producer, because a lot of people don't gravitate towards that.
Yeah, it's true. Well, I have an interesting story of how I kind of got into this business and how I continue to stay in this business. But I was always interested in filmmaking. As a kid, actually made a little like animated short when I was a kid for a festival, and like I was always interested in how movies were made. So I was, back when people used to watch DVDs, I would be one of the kids that watched all the behind the scenes and all the bonus material, and that was really like how I learned. I had the opportunity to meet a pair of brothers, John and Andy Irwin, when I was 18 years old, and
Okay.
I was just starting to get into trying to figure out what I was going to do. I thought I'd maybe go to animation school, and I actually started an animation school, an animation school called Animation Mentor. And I thought, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be an animator. But I loved movie making. I had the opportunity to work with them on like a little TV series that they were doing, and I went and PA'd for them. It never really, I don't think it really aired anywhere, but they got like 6 episodes greenlit and they got to make them. So I was a PA on it. So I enjoyed my time with them. And then I got to participate with them again on a documentary. And it seemed that God just kept putting them in my life, where my parents were a part of a ministry, and they were doing a doc for it called Mysterious Islands, which was about Charles Darwin's journey to the Galapagos Islands in Ecuador. So I got to go on that and be kind of a PA because my parents were involved in the ministry. And so they just kind of were like, hey, you seem to like work with us. Like we have a film coming up. Do you want to come be a part of the set? So I came, and I just honestly, I didn't know what I was going to do. I just wanted to serve and wanted to help and wanted to learn, which is still one of the key things that I tell anybody that's kind of getting into the industry, and just say, just find ways to be valuable. So I kind of looked around, and I didn't know what to do. It seemed like everybody had jobs and people knew more than me, and the PA thing, I was just trying to find value there other than like running and grabbing food and coffee and those kinds of things. And I noticed that, hey, it looks like they need people on set. They need like extras to be in their scenes. And I overheard a conversation where they were talking about getting these cardboard cutouts for the background. And when I started talking to everyone, it seemed that nobody wanted to do the job, and it sounded like a terrible job to go get extras, especially volunteer extras, to be on set. And I just thought, hey, there's my in. I can do that. I can rally people, and who doesn't want to be in a movie? This has got to be the easiest thing in the world, right? So, and it kind of was, honestly. Like, I've not met a lot of people that haven't wanted to be in a movie. So I just started like calling people, and before I had this big scene in the movie where there was like this theater, and they were panicking about how they were going to make it work. And I ended up working and getting like 700, 800 people out to the scene, and they're all like amazed. And I just really like told people at the movie and asked them if they wanted to be in it, and they were into it. So I didn't feel like it was that big of a contribution, but because of that, they actually gave me a producer credit because it was a real indie film. And then I continued to do stuff like that for the rest of the shoot. And I just kind of walked away from it and thought, hey, that was a fun experience. I'm just going to go home. And a couple months later, the director John Irwin called me up, and he said, hey, you seem to really like know how to get people out and like the business, and you seem to be into it. Do you want to come work with me for a couple months promoting the movie that you worked on, October Baby? And I said, yeah, sure, that sounds fun. Like, so I was like 18, 19 years old at the time, so I didn't really have anything else going for me. So I went, and I never left. Honestly, I'm 30 years old now, so I just to this day maintain that attitude of how do I serve and how do I add value. And that has manifested itself in many ways over the last 11 years. That's how long I've worked with John and Andy. It's manifested itself on the movie Woodlawn that we were filming at the time. The extras job never left me. To this day, I can never escape it. Everybody, like every movie I've in some capacity, everyone's like, how do you get all these people? And you know what? Instead of saying that's beneath me, I say if that's what is serving the production, I'll help. And that's that attitude that I think a lot of young people need to have when they come into the space. So I've always had that service attitude, and it's manifests itself in marketing. I've worked on I think now 11 feature films, and I've had a bunch of different roles, and I think that's kind of the idea behind a producer role. It can be an ambiguous title, right? You go and you watch the credits of a movie, there might be 15 producers. What does that mean? And I'm sure you get into that on your podcast, so we can get into that more in a minute. But really, it's I think it's more entrepreneurial thinking. When you're you really got to solve, like, if you like solving problems, a film set is a problem factory, and it's accelerated because everything is it's like taking a whole company and saying, hey, we're going to jam that whole company into 6 months, or less. And so there's so many problems that if you're someone that likes solving problems, it's just rampant. So I like solving problems. So for me, that served me well in that, so I'll always be looking for, one of the things that I always approached is, what does nobody else want to do? And whatever, so because that's probably the area where I'm going to have an in. So nobody wanted to do extras. I thought that's where, if I do that better than anybody else, maybe someday someone will say, hey, I wonder if you could do something else better. It's that whole biblical principle of faithful with a little, you'll be faithful with a lot. So I've worked on the marketing of a ton of films. So that's always a component. I've had the luxury, not a lot of producers do, to see a lot of the products I've worked on from concept to market. That's a cool cycle. Some producers come on just for the production side and then they're gone and they move on and they're on to the next thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. Some producers are more specialized in the finance side and they're more of an executive producer kind of role. I've got to wear a lot of different hats throughout the years on all the different productions. So I've been a part of the financing side extensively. That was something that I found out early on was going to be a need, that we had, we had a need when we didn't have studio financing to raise money. So I said, okay, what does it take to raise money for a film? What does the business side of that look like? What does the financial side look like? And who are the kinds of people and how does that work? And that was a journey. And I got a ton of experience doing that. And, I've been on, I've now had the opportunity to produce a documentary, and I've been a part of 3. What does it look like to produce a documentary? It's never, I always kind of joke, I never have had enough time in one kind of principle to become an expert in it, because every time I finish something, I'm like, oh, I finally feel like I know what I'm doing there. I will get moved to do something else, which is probably suits me. But yeah, everybody's journey is a little different. I don't think there is a path necessarily that you say, hey, you start doing this and you're going to end up doing that ever in film, So I feel like, I'm still on that journey to see what kind of producer I am. And, I love the business and I love the mechanics of what it takes to make something work. And in film, it's kind of the producer job. It's the guy that's saying, all right, I'm going to figure out how to empower the creative and oversee the business and shepherd the marketing, kind of see it all the way through. And so that's been my journey. A little unconventional. I kind of like it that way. I started with one company, 2 guys, and I've been with them for 11 years. So I've had a little bit of an unconventional route in that I kind of my tide kind of rose with the ships that I started with, which was John and Andy. So I got to ride their wave and learn and kind of grow through their system of filmmaking, which has been fun. And I'm starting to now work with a lot of other filmmakers. So I'm getting to learn kind of how other people do it, which is exciting too.
Yeah, no, that's cool, that hearing your story and how that all came together. Definitely different from some of the other producers I've had on the show, but
yeah,
still
and
really
different
cool.
producers have different strengths. It's hard to people ask me that. Okay, so what does a producer do? And it's like a little bit of everything. And sometimes it's different on each movie. I've met producers that don't do anything on set. And then I met producers that do everything. So there's typically a lead producer I've found on a project, that is the guy, the end all be all, and then there's a lot of different kinds of producers that work around him. I've got to be that lead producer on some projects, and on a lot of them I got to support the other producer. I've worked very closely with a producer named Kevin Downs, who's produced like, I don't even know, like 50 movies or something like that.
Okay.
An expert, in the producing side. He specializes more on the deals and the overall strategy for the set and kind of the leadership from a high level. And he usually works pretty closely with a line producer, that will do the nuts and bolts of the production. But he has his hand in all of that, and he's probably done that job in some capacity and could probably do it, maybe not as well as a line producer, but there's got to be somebody where the buck stops on a movie set. And typically that's the producer and shared kind of with the director in the creative capacity, a director, and in the producing and business capacity, a producer. So
Yeah. So I'm curious, like, what's your favorite area of producing? Because like you said, producers do so much. Like, if you had your choice, what would you focus on?
That's a good question. I think I'm still figuring that out, because I've had I've operated in a lot of different roles. I love products.
Okay.
So to me, it's not necessarily about the mechanics of producing, as much as it's being able to see an idea from the idea stage all the way to this point where you're sitting in a movie theater and watching people watch it. That I think is probably my favorite part, is to shepherd something through from the idea stage, from a piece of paper to finally in the marketplace. So I think that's, I know some producers that just love production. I don't necessarily love production. I just love creation, and I like to see it through to market, so
yeah,
shepherding of a project, so how that will manifest over my life and into the next products I do, will be interesting to see. But I absolutely love the process of having an idea or a dream and seeing that through, or helping somebody with their dream and seeing it through to completion. So that's probably a broader answer, but I really just, I am about the product. I've always been a product guy. I couldn't, that's why for me, a lot of my faith and my calling and what I want to do in life are so tightly connected, because it's just so hard to do this kind of content, and to work in film and entertainment. For me, I'm so passionate about the product that I can't kind of disconnect the two of them. Not for me. Some people can, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for me, it's very much about the product, So I guess that would be the answer. I love to see great products get made and help in some way. So I was fulfilled doing extras because I knew in some part my work contributed to the final picture. That's what's so cool about film, man. It's like there are things in life where people, they take credit. They can take credit for it, and it's truly kind of all on them. Film is a hard one for any one person to take credit, and that's maybe why I love it so much. It's crazy to me. I just finished a documentary project that's still in theaters right now called The Jesus Music, and it's amazing to me how movies even get made, because it's just this symphony of creativity and business all working together, and it's kind of a chaos until the very last minute, and then it's done, and you kind of look at it and go, oh, it worked, and people are laughing, and there's all these moments in between of like, oh my gosh, is this terrible? Is everyone going to lose their money, or is this even going to work? Is the product going to even work? It's not funny, it's not entertaining, it's not interesting. It's like, oh, these personalities are difficult, and then at the end of it all, you're sitting in a movie theater and no one sees all that. They just see what's in front of them, and it's done. And on features, it's terrifying, because in this moment, like, okay, I got 30 days to, each day matters, so
yes.
So for this one day I'm working on something, I'm going to see this one day's worth of work a thousand times, and it's going to contribute to the overall feel and look of this movie. And if I'm just having a bad day or I don't deliver on something, it could have these devastating long-term effects to the picture. Or you can know that like, oh, it could have been better. So I have this kind of all or nothing approach to it, because I'm like, John Rowan used to say pain is temporary, film is forever. And it's kind of true when you're working on a film. You want to get it right. So that's why it's a very interesting process, and it's amazing any movies actually turn out.
Yeah, that is so true. So, because you mentioned how like you started on October Baby and some of those that were still more independently produced and distributed. So what was that kind of the change like when you went from working on those to now there's a studio?
I've gone back and forth. I've had the luxury of kind of a combinations of all of them, which is really good, well-rounded education for me. So I'll run you through my film chronologically, my film history here. So I worked on a movie called October Baby. I was co-producer on that. Then I got to do a movie called Mom's Night Out. So October Baby was fully financed by private equity and independently released. So we had a distribution deal. So for anybody that isn't as familiar with how these things kind of work, when you independently finance a film, you still have to get obviously distribution for it. So you kind of pay for this thing, so if you back in the day for October Baby, I think it was an $800,000 production budget, which is like, I don't even understand how we did that today. So we shot that movie for $800,000, and then we were sitting on this thing, right? We have this product, we don't know anybody in Hollywood, and then you shop it, which is this, you go around town and you try to sell it. And you get people and have an inn somewhere, and they go, yeah, I know this guy and he can help get in here. And you try to take your movie around and you sell it. And we didn't sell it, and so you can also do kind of a pay to play deal where you basically, you do a deal which is essentially just a services deal with these distributors that are out there. Some of them are really good, like a Roadside, and then some of them aren't so good, and they kind of book the theaters for you, and they help you kind of get into those places. And for that, you have to kind of give them an upfront fee. A lot of times you got to do the marketing yourself. And so for October Baby, it was very unique. We got to work with the teams that had done a lot of the Sony Affirm films. So we essentially just kind of rented their marketing team and put it on ours, and then did a services deal with Samuel Goldwyn, which is the distributor. And because of the team that we were using, we also got Provident Films, which is a great group, to come on board and kind of help shepherd it. There was a guy at the time, Ben Howard, that helped us really kind of oversee that. So that was our first deal ever. And it was like we were learning it as we went along, and we made mistakes. And funny enough, the movie, it did well. It broke even. It's been profitable, or at least close to profitable. It wasn't a slam hit or anything like that, but it was a solid, little release. It cracked the top 10 movies in America at the time. Hunger Games, which is a Lionsgate film, and now we're with Lionsgate, came out that weekend. So we got to kind of be alternative programming to them. So they have a big release that everybody's scared to release at the same time. So we released in that kind of same window to kind of take the business of people that didn't want to go see Hunger Games and didn't have anything else to watch, which is a strategy theatrically. So we did that. And so I got to learn like all this entrepreneurial side of filmmaking. And then our very next picture was a movie called Mom's Night Out, which was fully financed by Sony through their faith label, Affirm, which is shepherded by a guy named Rich Peluso. And I think he had saw October Baby and thought it was well done, and then someone had brought the script for Mom's Night Out to us, and then John rewrote it, and Sony was interested, and so they greenlit it, and so they paid for the script and the production and the marketing, and that was a fully financed studio picture, which was interesting. I learned a lot about how intense legal can be on that, because they're watching out for themselves a little bit more than sometimes when you're just kind of shooting from the hip and being independent. Yes. A lot about there was a lot more kind of oversight on the production side of everything, to make sure that we didn't screw anything up. But we actually did a great job on it, and we had a line producer that was pretty experienced named Daryl Lefevre, who came in and helped us. And he was been in the industry for a long time. He's a believer. He's really was passionate about what we wanted to do, and he wanted to kind of jump from the studio accounting, production accounting side to more line producing. And he made a great jump, and he's produced now probably like 30 films. So he really helped us in that transition. But I remember the kind of anxiety of like, oh, now there's real Hollywood people around, and it's you shouldn't be so nervous about that stuff. I was telling someone the other day, it's like, at the end of the day, in my opinion, it's all about connecting to an audience. It's about creating compelling stories through film that is done in a professional way and connecting with an audience. And if you can do that, the rest kind of figures itself out, so
Yeah.
not like at some point you're going to get like an award for being able to work with studios, and you haven't made it, at this point. If you've done a studio picture, I mean, you're just as successful. What made us successful was a movie called I Can Only Imagine, which was independently produced and independently released, essentially.
Okay.
We did a distribution deal with Roadside, and because of that, Lionsgate was involved. But I think they'd be the first to tell you they didn't have too much to do with the release of it. Really, Roadside was leading the charge, which works with independent producers. So, and it was telling for me that moment, because it was like, I don't know what it is about. Maybe because we all work in film, we're all waiting for like our hero's journey, where Gandalf comes and tells us that we're the one, or Obi-Wan Kenobi, and it's not really like that. It's in the real experience of, I think, working in entertainment film, because you might work just as hard on one movie and it doesn't work, and then work less on another, and that one works. And then everybody wants to call you and talk to you, and then you're somebody and you're something, and then maybe a couple of years later you're not. It's like, so you realize, like, there's no moment where you arrive, at the other side of, in my opinion, on the other side of the artist love when I say this, but this is a producer's podcast. On the other side of the table, when you get past all the, oh wow, we're at Lionsgate or at Sony, or we're, this is so crazy, we're at a real big studio and there's studio people and I'm a fraud and all that crap. Like, you get to the other side of it and you realize they're a company who are in the business of selling product,
Mm-hmm.
movie tickets, streaming, DVDs. They want to move a lot of product, and it's a very hard product to make. So that's why there's not a lot of people that get to do it. It's very risky, and so there's not a lot of openings. That's why it's so hard to break into this industry. But the other side of it, it's they're a business. So if you're able to move a lot of product and you can actually get people out to your stuff, then great, you made it. So it's not like this moment, so I think that can sometimes sound like negative, but it's not. It actually helps you have a little perspective. It's like, what, just do great work, do the work God has called you to do, do it unto the Lord, so it's excellent, and then try to be shrewd and try to be wise and try to understand audiences and try to understand and try to make the best story you can. It all comes back to story, all of it. That's why our name of our company is Kingdom Story Company, because at the end of the day, it's all about story. Because you can spend $100 million on a movie and it has a lame story and audiences hate it and it fails. So or you could spend $7 million like we did on Imagine, and it's an amazing story and it connects with an audience and is the #1 independent film of 2018 and one of the highest grossing, highest grossing independent film of 2018, and one of the top 10, movies that when it came out, and probably one of the top 100 grossing films of that year. And then there's somebody else that probably spent $50 million and knows everybody and has the right actors in it, and it failed. I love products like The Chosen that's happening right now, because it's just turning everybody's on head, because it's brilliant. Now in that scenario, they don't even have a distributor. They're just going straight to an audience, and the audience loves it. So that's the purest form of it right there. You can see, like, it's just about creating compelling content with a good story and figuring out how to connect to an audience, and then you're successful. So yes, it's a really long roundabout way to say there's a lot of learning curves. when you start working with a studio and with a bigger organization, for sure. You learn how to do things versus independent. But at the end of the day, it's just about kind of doing the same thing, maybe a little bit more professionally, and with a little bit more accountability. And then eventually when you get through it, you kind of understand, okay, this is how you do it, and it's, so for us, yeah, our first year was all these like, how does this actually really happen? How do you do, like, how does the studio do this? And, so that was a learning curve that now I look back on, I go, I don't know why I was so nervous. This is just how studios operate in some ways, At the other side of, our production is someone who's in charge of physical production, who's worked on productions himself and is looking out for the studio to make sure that we actually deliver on what we say. And on the other side of the creative side of the studio, there's somebody that's trying to make sure that the product is as creative as it can be and is trying to serve you to do that. And so, yeah, it's a funny world of making movies, but I do feel blessed to have worked on both. And I could go on for hours telling you the differences between both and the pros and cons. I don't think there necessarily is a better, one. There's guys that prefer to be independent and they work well, and they make it work. And there's some blessings to the studio, both on the distribution and the production side. So it's kind of all over the place with that, but it has been neat to learn from both.
I bet. So one thing I was wondering, because I was at your class that you did at CWBFF this year.
Oh, cool! That's awesome.
And yeah, I really enjoyed that.
I felt like I was like talking a million miles an hour. I do that, and I might have overloaded everyone there, but
maybe a little bit. But
yeah,
I enjoed it.
That's awesome.
But when you were teaching the class, like you did a really good job of kind of explaining. I guess I would kind of call it the payout funnel.
Yes.
When films get released, and I was wondering if you could maybe briefly go over that.
Yeah, kind of like back to what I was saying earlier. One of the things that I've always enjoyed is figuring out how to serve the production and serve people. So when I first came into film, I was amazed to find out that there's so much ambiguity behind how the business operates. Like, what other business is it hard to find out how the business even operates? Even to this day, it's a challenge at times. It's a very tricky, but it's not rocket science. We're a bunch of filmmakers. They're not the most brilliant guys in the world. So, the class I taught that you were referring to was a 101 for film economics, right? Which is to explain kind of how does the business work for films, and how do you make money on a film, and where does that money come from? So in the class, I kind of talked about this concept that called the 50-50 net, which was kind of how you raise money in film, which is, you sell off, you create an LLC, you sell off half of that LLC, or grant a profits interest of half of it to yourself as the producers, and then you sell off the other half to investors. And then there's this kind of classic model that is made popular in a lot of kind of film economics books and classes, and it's kind of the industry norm, where whoever pays for it and puts up the money for what we call the equity or the production financing, they get their money back first. So it's just this idea like, hey, they put up all the risk, they get the money back first. After they get their money back, then you split it down the middle. That's what's called the 50-50 net. And sometimes you give them a bump of some kind, like, hey, I'm going to come to you, Micah, and I'm going to say, hey, I want you to invest in my movie. Let's call it, $1,000, and I say, for that, I'm going to put this movie in. Maybe I say my plan is to put it on YouTube and make ads or whatever, to make it back, since this is a small scale movie. I'll give you 10% on that. So so I put it on YouTube, it makes lots of ad money. I pay you the first $1,000 and then I pay you an extra 100. And I say, hey, from this point on, we're just going to split it down the middle. We both own this thing because you put up all the money and I did all the work, right? Mm-hmm. That simple idea scaled infinitely, is like kind of the idea of how production works. With the exception of this idea that a lot of guys that kind of go raise money miss out on, and a lot of investors don't understand. which is a big part of what I try to educate both the investment side and the producer sides on. So, I came to you and I said, I wanted to have you put up this money to make my $1,000 YouTube video. And again, I'm using this in small numbers and kind of in a way that people can understand because it gets more complex as you spread out.
Yeah.
You give me $1,000 and I make the thing and I put it up on YouTube and I realized, you know what, dang it, I need to advertise this to actually start to get the flywheel turning, right? In the film business, that's called P&A. So it stands for prints and advertising. It used to be for the cost of actually the creation of the prints. Now we have something called DCPs, which are digital hard drives that go out. But it used to be the idea of like, hey, it costs to make film reels and it costs to make billboards, right? In the 20s, wherever they advertise, wherever they came up with this term. So that advertising dollars, typically, you at this point have paid, to make my $1,000 video, and I'm not going to want to tap the well too many times. So either I go to a studio and I say, hey, can you give me another $1,000 to advertise this? Or let's say $500 to advertise it. Or I go to individuals and I ask for it. And I say, listen, I already sold off all the equity. So there's no equity position left in this thing because that's what it took to make the movie. And this is advertising. So it's like debt. It's short term. It's going to be spent in the span of 6 months. So it's the smartest thing to do is take it on as debt. So what a lot of guys in the film space don't first time film investors don't understand is about that. They don't think about the fact that, hey, after you make a thing, you got to pay for it to market it and get it out there. Sometimes you got to pay twice, sometimes more than that, the cost of the production. I'm trying to remember the industry standard for it is like, it varies, with the cost of your production, so smaller films, the multiple is higher of how much the advertising will be. And on bigger films, it might be, 1 times it, or 2 times it. But I think it's roughly like twice the amount of your production budget. So this idea of advertising is what a lot of people don't understand. That comes in later. It's what they call last in, first out. So that's the part that a lot of equity investors don't realize. So you'll pay for this asset, and then it will make a certain amount of money. So like you paid that $1,000 for this movie. I spent $500, and you hear it made $1,000, yet you only get 500, and you go, oh, what's going on? So you just have to understand how the windows break down. So in the film world, when you make a independent film, you're going to have to advertise it. It's going to cost a lot of money. Typically, they say the rule of thumb is about $1,000 per screen. So
okay.
Think about this. If you're releasing even a limited release on 300 screens, that's $300,000 just to be on those 300 screens. And then you haven't really advertised anything. That's just the cost to be in the theater. You might want to spend, I've heard things like you want to spend like 10,000 per location, but you can see where this money could start getting crazy.
Yes.
October Baby, we spent just under $1 million to make the film. And I think we were about $4 million to advertise the film, or just under that. So you see the multiple there, or a movie like Mom's Night Out. I don't have the exact thing, it's been a while, but I think that was like a $3 or $4 million production, and we probably spent 8 advertising it, so twice the amount of the production. But so you see, as you scale up, the amount of that, the multiple kind of lowers. But so you have to be careful about is how this plays out practically. If you're an independent producer and you raise $1 million to go make your first indie, you might have to spend another $2 million that's debt, and that's in first position in front of your investors. Equity return. Now it's debt, so they don't have long-term, thing. But what if your movie doesn't make a lot of money? Now your equity guys might never see the money. And that's what I kind of did in my economics class. There's some great books I would recommend highly, but there's a book from Reel, like a film reel, to Deal. It's one of my favorite books. I've given out probably 100, 200 of them. It breaks it down. It's a little dated now because it came out, before the digital world took off and streaming and everything. But it very simply breaks down how to do an independent financing. And that it just explains that idea, like, hey, raise the money, sell off half the company, as the producers and the creatives hold out the other half. Let those guys get their money back first with a premium, and then split 50-50. Inform them about the fact that there's going to be debt that's brought on later, because they won't like that, if you don't, because it will, in a sense, it dilutes them. But it has to happen. It's part of how it works. That's why you give them 50-50 and they get first position. So that's that's a nutshell how it works. And then how it breaks out, I think I explained in my class that, in film, there are these windows, and these windows, we call them windows, and very simply put, those are just the exclusive kind of time spans that you give different platforms. So when traditionally you came out theatrically, they call it the theatrical window. So that's in theaters. So that would be the first window. And there was typically anything from, I think, 90 plus days from the amount of time that you come out of theaters till when you can do the next window, which would be home entertainment, which would be when you release the DVD or the VHS back in the day. Now it's when you release it digitally as well, like on Amazon and iTunes and stuff. And then historically, the next window after that would be some sort of television window, right? So you go from, in the 2000s, you go from theaters to DVD to television, and then to later on to even a basic television. Sometimes you'd have a premium television like an HBO or something. So those windows are all valuable, and it's all how you recoup how much it costs to make the movie. So rarely do you recoup in theaters unless you have a very successful movie. So when you're doing the math for your movies, you might go, okay, we're going to retain 40% of our theatricals. So if the movie makes $1 million, we might get $400,000 back, right? I'm probably lost. All your podcasters have moved on to something more interesting. But when you retain that you might have spent $1 million on the movie and $1 million advertising, so now you only have 400,000. So how do you recoup, right? So how you recoup is you get how much noise and how successful you are in theaters is also the biggest advertisement for what we call the downstream revenue for a film. So, if you make a bunch of noise and you do well theatrically, then that's going to make your DVD do more. And it's going to, DVDs are kind of going away, but historically they were great. But, so there's a lot there. I could probably talk for hours. I would bore all your people, but there's all these levers now on how that works, because DVD windows is quickly evaporating at a staggering level rate. Now there's other windows that are compensating for that, mainly the streaming window, so that's become a big thing. And then during COVID, there was this other window that was kind of added. They called it the PVOD window, because there's all these abbreviations for things. So I'm just fire hosing your podcast, just like I did that talk. There's all these abbreviations, but they're all just different windows that you can release. So simply put, if you're a consumer of films, that when sometimes you'll see a movie available on iTunes or Amazon prior to being able to rent it, during COVID, there was a window where you could basically watch a movie for the cost, you could rent it, but it was about the cost it would normally cost to buy the movie. It was like $20. They called that a premium rental. And it was this window kind of between theaters or even skipping theaters and between the time that you could rent it, right? Because if you can rent a movie for $5, you're probably going to do that, right? And not buy it digitally. So they were trying to kind of make more money in that window to compensate for the lack of theatrical. But historically, your windows are theatrical when you're in theaters, home entertainment when it's on DVD, or when you can digitally buy it on Amazon and iTunes, and you can digitally rent it on iTunes and Amazon, and you can rent it physically from Redbox. All those are kind of that home entertainment window that kind of hit usually around the same time. And then either you go to a premium cable deal with like an HBO or something, or you go to streaming. That's how it's working now, with the exception of that PVOD thing I mentioned. So those are kind of the windows where you make money from. And then on television, and catalog content, kind of forever, the movie will kind of trickle in revenue. So that was a lot of information very quickly. So
No, you did a good job, because it is a whole
it's
lot.
A lot.
It's,
if I could draw it out for you, it wouldn't be that. It's not that hard, really. I mean, and listen, I'm still learning things today about how some windows work, and that's just what you're gonna have to. If you're watching this listening to this podcast, and you're going, God, how am I ever gonna learn all this crap? It's really not that hard. It's really not that hard. It's really just the art form. The hardest part of film is not figuring out all that. necessarily. It's the art form of releasing and how to release and how much to spend and how it will affect those windows, and honestly just getting data, because I'll drop another book bomb on you. There was a book called To Pixar and Beyond, which is one of my favorite books. And if you're a producer that's just trying to figure out the business side, it's a great resource, because it was written by the CFO of Pixar. And he was hired by Steve Jobs to come in and try to figure out this entrepreneurial business that Steve Jobs owned called Pixar. And it's all his frustrations of trying to understand how the stinking film business worked, and him just kind of venting, going, I don't understand why this business, like these companies won't share their pro formas with me and won't even tell me how this money is made. Why all this secrecy? That's Hollywood. The formulas, the projections, how something makes money. It's coveted stuff. It's like nobody shares like how I've gotten recently, just because we work very closely with Lionsgate. Sometimes they'll help us try to model out how something will do, but never before have I gotten a real model. Like I remember trying to figure out how to tell an investor how he's going to make his money back. It's like, these guys are just normal corporate guys going, hey, give me a pro forma. And we're going, yeah, well, the thing is, it's really kind of almost impossible to do a pro forma for you. And they're like, it's impossible to do a pro forma. And we're going, yeah, see, the thing is, nobody shares the data. So we have no idea, so that is, it's kind of hilarious. And that's what they talk about in that book. And it's a good lesson for anybody who's kind of getting into the business side to kind of understand, there is a lot of secrecy behind how to project out revenue, which makes it very hard when you're raising money independently. So
I bet. No, I'll definitely add that one to my
it's good
ever growing list of books.
And I'll have a few more probably before the end of the podcast. So
sounds good. So I did want to ask, because you brought in and mentioned like streaming platforms and all that. What advice do you have to keep up with all the changes that are happening?
I don't know. I could use some advice myself. I read a lot of I'll keep up to date with industry stuff, through Variety or Deadline or Hollywood Reporter. I don't read it obsessively. But, I would say also just talking to people that are working in the business, it's an interesting time. It's changing so quickly. It's really hard to keep up with. There's a lot. I'll say this. The demand for content is going to continue to grow.
Okay.
Because, there's so many different competitors in town. So you have Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, Disney Plus. The list goes on. And they're, the demand, and so they're all fighting over the same kind of group of, they're fighting over all these consumers. So they want to figure out how to attract them over. So that's good news for content creators. How the business works on their side. I would love to see more, and everyone would, all the filmmakers especially, would love to see more openness to sharing the data, so because when we release a movie in theaters, we know how well it does and how many people watch it and how many tickets are sold that day, hourly, from Rentrack. And then, when you go to home entertainment, Walmart will give you updates on how many DVD units sold. And when you do an electronic purchase, through Amazon or iTunes, how many people buy the thing. You don't get a lot of data from these streamers. They don't tell you how many people watch your movie. Sometimes they'll be like leaks, like that, what just happened with, I think a week ago, some employee of Netflix released a report on how Squid Games or whatever that show is had 1 billion views or something, or added $1 billion to the bottom line of Netflix because it's had hundreds of millions of views. It's crazy, but we don't, so that's interesting. I think as the competition begins to build over the years and there's more streamers out there, I think it's going to force probably those streamers to have some accountability. So that will be interesting to see how to keep up with how it's changing and growing. I would say just read industry reports, because they'll those changes will be cited, and then talk to other producers who are out there selling it. I'm still learning about how the streaming world works. It's new to me too. I haven't done a lot of streaming deals, if any, directly. But I have friends that have, so it's been interesting to learn from them. That's probably the best way, is just to make friends with someone who's done a streaming deal, to understand how that works. You know, a lot of how the streaming deals work is that there's like buyouts. You know, there's licensing and there's buyouts. I'm pretty sure Netflix, from what I've been told, prefers buyouts. So they'll just purchase your piece of content outright and then they own it, you know, which is different than licensing where they have the right to it for a certain amount of time, you know. But they do licensing deals as well. But I think Netflix, especially for originals, prefer like a buyout plus. So you know, let's say you have a show you come up with, they'll say, okay, this is how much the show is going to cost to make. You cut yourself in as a producer, and then we'll pay you the cost of, you know, each episode. So let's say each episode's $1 million and you get 6 episodes. They'll pay for the budget of $6 million to go make it. And then when you deliver it, they might say, you know, plus, you know, 10% on each episode. So you make, you know, $100,000 an episode or whatever. So it's interesting how that works. That's different. So you know how much it costs, but you also, if your thing becomes Squid Games or the most popular thing on Netflix, you're not going to see the upside on that on the stuff that you've already sold. Now, if they want a season 2 and you didn't, you know, do a 2-season contract or something, now you're popular. Now you can renegotiate or try to get a higher rate. But that's what's interesting about the world of streaming. You know, the guys that made Tiger King, you know, I'm sure they got paid decent money for that series, but that series went on to become the world's most popular thing for, you know, a couple of months. And it's not like they made any more money because of it, which is a different, interesting world of how streaming works. Now, they can leverage that success to go back to Netflix and get paid more the next time. And now they're really, you know, valuable. But it's just interesting. You know, I think there's a lot of challenges, and but there's also upside to that too. And there's opportunity in all of that. But yeah, streaming is changing the game because one of our major windows, well, over the last 2 years, so much is changing so rapidly that the smartest people in this business are trying to keep up. Because of the pandemic, with theaters being shut down, it's severely changing the business model, because the way the film economics currently is built, it depends highly on the theatrical window, you know, and theatrical window being gone, that's what you saw, this interesting shift in how everything's working, you know. So there are people that will tell you that the theatrical business is entirely dead and it's gone and it's a dinosaur and it's going to be gone, and like the DVD. And I don't believe that. I do think it's probably changed. The most significant change is the amount of time between the theatrical release and home entertainment. It used to traditionally be about a 90-day window. That's changing. You're seeing 50-day windows. You're seeing less. You're seeing same-day releases with like HBO and HBO Max and releases. You're seeing a lot of that changing. So there's disruption there. What and how it will finally shake out, it's anyone's guess, you know. So I don't think it's entirely gone. I think everybody during 2020, all the different distributors and organizations panicked, and there was this like, you know, surge of streamers, you know, and everybody who had a streamer became very valuable. It'll be interesting to see how that, you know, it's definitely changing. Consumer behaviors has changed a little bit, so it'll be interesting to see how that eventually pans out.
For sure.
It's an interesting business. Film and entertainment it's constantly changing, you know, in different ways, and some ways very slowly and other ways very quickly. And it's a lot to keep up with, but it's fun. It's a good challenge.
Yeah, that is for sure. It's always something new to play around with.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So I have a few kind of wrap up questions.
Do it. Oh, if I'm monologuing too long.
So I guess my first one would be, what's like one thing you know now about distribution you wish you would have known back when you were first distributing a project?
Oh, that's a good question, because, you know, distribution is really half the battle. You know, making the movies one half the battle, figuring out how to release it is the other. Such a good question. I know there's so much. you stop. I just got through a theatrical release, and I'm asking myself a lot of questions right now. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know. There's some questions there's some things that I wish I would have known 3 weeks ago. you know, um, one of the things that I think is it's very hard. How we think consumers get information and how they interact with it, in our minds is a lot simpler sometimes than the way it is in reality. So, what you spend your money on and who, makes noise and who tweets about your film could be very significant or could end up not being significant at all. And I think one of the things that I really tend to believe is that without an ad buy that is substantial, or at least not, I guess what I wish I knew now, than that I know now, is that you really need a substantial ad buy on television and to support your release. And without it, it's very hard to make enough noise in it to be in enough places for people to really start talking about it and get out. And I think we made that mistake on Woodlawn. I don't think we had enough of a robust ad buy, television ad buy. I also wish that, I guess that would be thing one. Thing two would be you really need to spend at least 1 times the amount of your product on advertising, but probably twice the amount. You never want that to get lopsided. You never want to spend more money making the product than you do marketing the product. That can be a big mistake. So, the idea of really making sure that you have an ad buy so it's in enough places, and then the ratio of how much it costs to make the thing versus how much you market it needs to at least be 1 or 2 times the amount of the cost of the product itself. Those would be 2 lessons. There's a lot of lessons. Timing you can't control, so
Yeah.
I mean, you can try to control it. Good luck. That's what I've learned. And so much of a release's success is due to timing. We just released a movie called Jesus Music. It was a documentary. In some ways, it did really well, and I'm so happy for how well it did. I think it would have done 4 times the amount of business it did during pre-pandemic era. But we're in a time now where people aren't going to the movie theaters unless it's something that's really captivating, at least in this season. I think that might change in the coming months. That feels like something they would have to go to theaters to enjoy. And documentaries are right now a product that people can enjoy at home, and it seems to be the preferred kind of thing to go to. That's a lesson learned. When we came out with Imagine, it was perfect timing. People really it felt like that year you saw a lot of hopeful releases coming out, and things that were optimistic, and it hit. God's Not Dead when it came out, which was another independent kind of hit that came out. The timing around that was so interesting. What the song and the political climate, so much of that is due to timing, and that's the one thing you really almost can't control.
Okay.
Fascinating. So yeah. There's an element of film that if you need to control things, probably not the right business for you. It seems to be a business of making the best of the kind of cards you are dealt each day on set, the season you release. It really is a roll with the punches kind of business, and then be strategic as much as you can, in an ever-changing, landscape, and in a very interesting world of releasing things. It's just so funny. You got to figure out how to make so much noise with the right people to get them out. That's a hard thing to control, and sometimes you can work your butt off and you don't see the results, and sometimes it just works.
Yeah.
I believe that's God's timing. Some people tell you it's luck, but there's definitely an element in Malcolm Gladwell's, I think it was Tipping Point. He did a whole chapter on luck and how the amount it plays in the success of some businesses versus others. and it is kind of though the what people do with it, makes the difference, so that when you have good time, you'll have good seasons for things, you'll have lucky breaks, but you still have to work just as hard, even if you don't have that. And it might come at the last minute, it might come before, so it's just timing is, everybody will tell you that timing is so important for the release of a film.
That is for sure. So my next question was, what have you learned about networking and building relationships in the industry?
Well, it's everything. So yeah, I think it's so important. It's one of those cliches that's just true. The best version of that to be is someone that knows how to connect with people, but then can deliver. I've met great networkers who can't deliver, and ultimately they become not so good networkers. I remember there's a lot of characters in film and that will tell you about everybody they know. That's a cliche, they'll name drop. And I remember being so impressed. I'm less impressed now about who someone knows, and I'm more impressed with people that have good relationships because they over time have delivered, and they have built equity in those relationships. I'm more impressed by that. I'm more impressed by someone who's worked with the same investor for 5 or 10 years than I am someone who's always good at raising money. I'm more impressed with someone who's worked longer with a studio than someone who's jumped around to a bunch of different people or had a bunch of different gigs. But I would say that you cannot underestimate how important that is. It's everything. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for me getting connected to John Irwin, and Andy Irwin, and the how important that relationship is. I think if you have integrity, is so key, to building long-term relationships. But that's another talk for another time. The importance of relationships is so important. I would say it's there are people that have skill but are terrible at connecting with people, and they are not successful. And there are people that are better connectors and don't have as much skill, and they're more successful. So I would say the best thing is to be really good at what you do and work really hard at being relational, because it's a relational business. So absolutely, it's super important.
Yes, that's for sure. I definitely have a few of those relationships that have definitely paid off over the years. So then my final question is, what's one piece of advice you'd give to someone who's just getting started, like on the path to being a producer?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd say learn to serve well. I think it's so underestimated. There's so much of an attitude of coming into film and saying, I'm going to be this, I'm important, this is what I have to offer, this is all this stuff. And it's like, you know what? I think that the most successful people I know learned how to serve better, and they learned how to serve the production. They learned how to serve the creatives. They learned how to serve the audience. Ultimately, that's what's going to help you excel. I remember, and I'll leave you with this thought. When I started out with John and Andy Irwin when I was 19, I wrote it down because I don't know why I had this insight, but I felt like this is what I needed to focus on. I wrote down, I'm going to focus on 3 things over the next 10 years. And those things are going to be like my goals. I'm going to focus on experience because I want to learn. I want to learn how to do my job well. I'm going to really focus on relationships, because if you change a job, or if you move on from a company, or if you go into something else, they can't take your experience and your relationships. And then the other thing I decided to really focus on was a good reputation. So it was experience, reputation, and relationships. Those are 3 things that will go with you. It wasn't money. I remember when I first started, I made a lot less money than a lot of guys that were my friends or my contemporaries or people that went from gig to gig. And I used to think, man, maybe I got this wrong. Maybe I focused on the wrong thing. But looking back on the last 11 years, I don't regret that. My focus was on experience, relationships, and reputation. And you know what? Those things go with you. If you have a good name, is rather to be chosen than great riches, the Bible says. And I think that's so key, to everything. Because investors will want to work with you. People want to hire you. Crews will want to work under you. People will want to work for you or with you when you have a good reputation. How you deal with relationships, is key. That also affects your reputations. It also affects how you, I believe that, if you have a lot of relationships, you have a lot of options, and you have a lot of connections. I always think of a problem through people. That's always been my approach. And then the experience of doing the work. So if you have that kind of servant attitude going in, I think you'll be successful, because you'll find something that might not be producing. I didn't know when I started out that I was going to be producing. I always tell people when they're like starting out, like, if you have this idea of what you're going to do, why don't you just try stuff, try a bunch of stuff. It might not be producing. It might not be directing. It could be being a first AD. It's a very good job. And you might be more gifted toward it. You might be a line producer. You might be more of a creative producer. You might be more skilled in the distribution and the marketing. There's a lot of jobs for people in film and entertainment. And don't pigeonhole yourself into this expectation when you start out. Try a bunch of stuff. Maybe you're better at something that you didn't think you were. And ultimately, Mark Cuban said it: follow your effort, not necessarily your what you want to do in life. Don't follow your dreams, follow your efforts, which is a roundabout way of saying that, and he explains it. If you're good at something, you'll enjoy it and you'll be passionate about it. And so you got to figure out what that is. So don't just try to say like, I'm not doing right because I'm not a producer. I'm not acting like a producer. It's just serve well, do a bunch of jobs, and you'll probably figure out what it is you're actually good at when you start doing it, So that would be my
Yeah. All right. No, that's really good. Well, thank you very much for coming on to talk with us today.
Hey, I wish I would have had your idea early on in life and just started asking people questions. And I don't know if podcasts were as popular when I started out, but that would have been a great way to just pick people's brain. That would be my last piece of advice. I'll just throw it in there. Just get mentored. Like, seek out mentorship. You'd be surprised how many people really want to pour back into the next generation. That's always been my secret weapon. Just listen, go places, ask good questions, do what you're doing right now with people. And you'll learn so much and you'll get relationships out of it. So there you go. That one's for free.
All right.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Until next time, make sure to subscribe to the Producer Podcast, and thanks for listening.